The Canberra establishment checkmates Australia's financial cops. Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of the people. Hello, John. Hot off the press.
Hi, Martin. How are you today?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Do you?
I'm doing well here in the winter. It's cold here in Wollongong, and no doubt you're enjoying the balmy English spring.
Well, it's actually summer now, 26, 27 degrees, balmy days, blue skies. Yeah, it's beautiful at the moment. It won't last long, but I'll enjoy it while I've got it.
Excellent. So yeah, Martin, we've got a new blockbuster revelation to reveal to the audience, and that is that in the last 24 hours, I've received a fresh batch of internal emails from the Federal Treasury in Canberra, and these emails come to me via a Freedom of Information request, and I went to the Treasury and asked for specific documents from October last year. When I published the Adams report into ASIC, because I was interested to see what Treasury had to say. Now, if we can recall back, and we'll get into this in a second, Martin, is 2 shows ago we talked about what ASIC thought about me, and that wasn't particularly flattering, but I wanted to know what Treasury had to say, because one thing that people need to understand, Martin, is that in the way Canberra works is the cream of the crop when it comes to public servants. They tend to work in 3 departments: the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Treasury, and the Department of Finance. So if you can get one of these big central agencies to give a tick of approval of your analysis, well, that carries a lot of weight, both in terms of the public service, but also carries a lot of weight in Parliament. And that's what I was interested to know. Now, Marta, it's interesting just to note that in the last 2 weeks, there was a group out there called the Australia Institute, and they published a report about inflation, and they tried to make the case that business profits, particularly in the mining sector, was driving inflation because business profit margins were increasing, and that was pushing up prices in the CPI. Well, so they published a report, and both the Treasury and the Reserve Bank of Australia came out publicly, both in Parliament but also in the press, and said this was a rubbish report, the analysis was flawed, and people should ignore the report. So Treasury has no hesitation to attack research when they think the research is bad. Now, obviously, since October, and obviously we had the establishment of the inquiry at the end of October, there has been no public criticism of my report, either by ASIC or the Treasury. So the silence of no criticism is an indication that I was on the right track. But now we have concrete internal emails where Treasury says John Adams was, quote, substantially correct. And this is the checkmate against ASIC, because their own main department that oversees the ASIC, which is the Treasury, basically said that I'm right, and ASIC's operational performance is going backwards. And as we go forward in this public inquiry in the Senate, ASIC has no defense anymore.
Yeah, it's very important that that point of validation comes through, right? Because, of course, you were using the ASIC information to be able to present it back to them, what they were actually already reporting publicly, but to have the Treasury then come out and say, actually, John Adams' analysis is correct, basically confirms that ASIC's performance has gone to hell in a handbasket.
Exactly. Now, Martin, just so we can refresh the audience in terms of what ASIC actually did say during this early period of October of 2022. So if we just go on to slide 1, now this is a slide that we used 2 shows ago, and I'm just going to focus on the first paragraph, because this is the National Media Manager saying, and dare I say, Martin, I don't even think he ever read the report, but his natural instinctive reaction of ASIC was, quote, it really needs to be strongly and unequivocally refuted and countered at the next parliamentary hearing. So no matter what Adam says, because it's got bad media, We just have to refute it. We have to attack it, and we have to try to change the media narrative. That was ASIC's position internally vis-a-vis National Media Manager. Now, Martin, if we go on to slide 2, when we go on the 11th of October, when ASIC is before the House of Representatives Economics Committee, what did the same National Media Manager say? A spirited defense by the chair of that silly Joan Adams report. So you've got basically the PR spin agent of the Financial Police Force of Australia saying that we are going to attack Adams. We're going to unequivocally, strongly refute his analysis. His analysis is stupid. His analysis is silly. He doesn't deserve our attention. He's a crackpot from Wollongong, etc., etc. This is the internal thinking at ASIC, and now we're going to show you what Treasury had to say. Now, Martin, before we just get into the Treasury element, there is one thing that Treasury picked up, and I just will explain it now before we actually go into the slides. So, what I did in the first volume of the Adams report that I released on the 6th of October was I took ASIC's raw numbers from their own annual reports, and I basically created a whole bunch of graphs and then conducted my analysis of that. And I checked all the numbers and made sure that all the numbers are correct. Now, in one specific financial year, which is 2017-2018, some of ASIC's own numbers were wrong. Now, the reason why we know they're wrong is because in 2018-2019, so the following year, they had a correction on one specific page, 284, where they said some of our numbers, not all of the numbers, but some of our numbers from the previous year were wrong. Well, because I focused on getting the data from the relevant page numbers, but I didn't read every page of every annual report. So this small note in the annual report of 2018-2019, with this small correction, I actually missed that. And I actually just used the actual raw data from ASIC's 2017-2018 report. So and the numbers were not too far off. They were slightly off, but not too far off. So that's the only one little minor thing that I missed and Treasury picked up. But Treasury, as we'll see in their own words, is that the fact that I missed this correction in ASIC's own documentation, it's not material. It doesn't change the broad story. It doesn't change the trends in the graphs. And basically, the core message that I was trying to communicate to the parliament, to the government, to the media, to the public, it is still a compelling, factually accurate story. And that's what we're about to show that they say about me inside their own emails.
Absolutely. And I think it's hilarious when you actually go on and look at it, because what it means is that Treasury was actually watching our earlier show when we raised this whole issue, right? I find it fascinating that you've got ASIC watching us, the Treasury watching us. I wonder how many other public servants are actually hanging off our every word.
Indeed. So let's go to slide 3, Martin. And so the first email I'll show is from Treasury. This is the 7th of October. So this is the day after I released the Adams report. And there's an internal email from one Treasury official to another. And it says, quote, just noting that Adams flagged a letter writing campaign last night, attracting a lot of interest in the comments. And then you can see a YouTube link. Now, I can confirm I've checked that link. That YouTube link, Martin, is our show, which we released on the 6th of October, called the Bombshell Adams Report. So a Treasury official the following day watched our show about my report, and they read the comments of the audience. So if people are listening to this and people are thinking about, should I write a comment in response to, in the interest of the people, there are people inside the establishment, there are people inside the government who are reading your comments. And they are, and your comments actually does influence how people in the public service actually respond to our content. So I think it's very important, Martin, that we continue to do these types of shows where we can communicate to the public, but also to public servants and the government who are watching about our insights about various issues to do with the financial system. But also, I think it's important that our audience knows is that it's important to you give your honest assessment about our content, but also on other issues related to the show, because people inside the government read your comments, and your comments are obviously going to influence how people respond to the Adams North analysis. And I think that's a powerful thing, because there's a lot of people, Martin, who sometimes get frustrated and think that public servants are in ivory towers and they are basically caught in a bubble, and they're not sort of paying attention to what the ordinary person on the street is thinking. Well, the good thing that we can confirm by this slide, Martin, is that there are some public servants who are keenly interested in what public has to think. And obviously, when we get a lot of comments on a show and there's a lot of different views being expressed about that content, there are people in the public service who are writing internal memos and notes about that. And that is obviously influencing some decision making, some thinking inside the government.
Yeah, and it shows you, I think, the power of social media and the importance of social media. Right, this is more than just an Adams and North show that goes nowhere. Actually, it has a resonance more broadly in Canberra, and there are people watching it and taking note of it. And we've had quite a lot of success over the years, Cash Brown, for example, as well as the ASIC campaigns, to make things different and better. So this is a very, very important platform and a very important set of processes which now are very much embedded in the way that government works.
Absolutely. Now, Martin, if we go on to the next slide, so the next internal email from Treasury is from the 14th of October. And this is what it says, this quote. It says, the statements in the covering letter are substantially correct. There are some minor issues with their calculation, but it doesn't affect the general message, i.e. errors are not material. There were errors in ASIC's annual report 2017-2018, where Adams may have used to compile his statistics. In fact, ASIC corrected those errors in the annual report 2018-19 on page 284. So here's the thing, Martin. So as part of my lobbying campaign on the 6th of October, not only did I publish my report, I wrote a 2-page cover letter, and I sent it to 30 politicians. And in that cover letter, I had a number of key findings from my analysis, and I said, these are the main things that you need to be aware of. And these were massive claims about ASIC's declining operational performance and how that should be concerning to the government and to Parliament, because it was contrary to the public interest. So here we have this ASIC, so this Treasury official saying that the statements in my covering letter are substantially correct. And there was only one little minor issue, which was ASIC's own data was wrong. I used ASIC's wrong data, and I missed the correction in the following year. But the error was not material, and the broad story is correct. And so again, whereas ASIC is saying, I'm an idiot, I don't deserve their attention, and no matter what I said, because I generated bad press, they're going to unequivocally and strongly refute what I have to say. Well, now we have internal correspondence from Treasury saying, actually, John Adams is right. And that's and the way the public service works, this is an absolutely devastating blow to ASIC's own credibility, because as we move forward into the second half of 2023, and as there'll be public hearings in the ASIC inquiry, I'll be using these types of statements to say that ASIC is only concerned about spin and propaganda. They're not willing to acknowledge where they are failing. They don't care about the public interest or the administration of justice. And their own colleagues in Treasury basically said, well, we got it right. And like you said, we've done some amazing campaigns over the last few years where we actually get deep into policy issues, and we actually try to argue against politicians and bureaucrats. And sometimes the media have called us conspiracy theorists. Sometimes other journalists have said, Adams and North have got a point. And now here's another piece of official correspondence where senior public servants inside one of the best government departments that have some of the smartest guys in the country were saying, we got it right again.
Yes, and it's just worth underscoring that, ASIC is more interested in protecting its own reputation, despite the fact we use their data in your report to validate their bad performance. But no, they went down a different rabbit hole and basically were trying to protect the institution rather than actually dealing with the material issues. And no wonder then that the Senate actually have an inquiry into them. And I guess the upcoming inquiry is going to go into some of these issues in more detail, because we know that their performance has been abysmal and their focus has been cover up rather than really dealing with the material issues.
Indeed. We'll get to the inquiry in 1 second, Martin. So the one thing, as we're just going to get into our last slide, Martin, before we get into some of our analysis and conclusions. But the one thing that I knew instinctively, because I know how Canberra works, is if you put out a report, there's a whole bunch of numbers that you're relying on as your underlying data set. What they're going to do is the government, the bureaucracy, we're going to check the numbers. And I was very conscious that they were going to check the numbers. And so what actually Treasury did was, so there's a unit inside the Treasury called the Financial Data Unit. And basically they took my report with my data set that I put in the back as an appendix, and they gave it this unit and said, go and check the Adams numbers and tell us whether he got the numbers right. Because if the numbers are wrong, well, then the whole report's wrong. But if the numbers are right, well, then it's a matter of interpretation. And in this last email, and this is the 24th of October, Martin, this is 3 days before before the Senate voted to establish the inquiry. It says, quote, the financial data team were kind enough to spare some time to look into Mr. Adams' claims, see email below, and verified that they were substantially correct. It didn't take into account where ASIC made a correction to some numbers that they have published. And we obviously have just dealt with that issue in the previous slide. But again, so we have an email on the 14th of October where some part of Treasury says Adams' claims about ASIC are substantially correct. And then they took my report to another team inside Treasury and to check the underlying data. And they came back and said, he is substantially correct. So we've had 2 independent teams inside Treasury look at this and said, Adam's got it right again. And as we go forward, we're going to see in the second half of this year, ASIC go on a spring offensive and basically say that we've conducted this restructure, we're fixing the whole problem, there's nothing to see here, we're doing a good job, and everyone should be confident in ASIC's ability to enforce the law. And now that we have internal confirmation within the government that ASIC's whole confidence statements are basically a charade, and that they are actually in decline in terms of its operational performance, I think this is going to be a big deal, because whatever excuse ASIC comes up with the next 6 months, I'm just going to keep on going back to these emails and saying, your own colleague said that I was right. And it's not just about money and staff, because as I showed in my report, they have more money, more staff, and they're doing less investigations, and this rate of no further action has gone through the roof. So it's not about resources. It's about culture. It's about the leadership of ASIC. It's about ASIC's senior leadership obsessed with public relations, and rather than actually running an effective law enforcement organization that's going after the crooks. And the one thing I'll say, Martin, is that obviously in relation to the package, it's now 11 months and and the investigation is ongoing. And as I said in the show, in the final secret, my barrister could have cracked this in 4 weeks, and here we are after 11 months, and we're still wondering what the hell's going on. So if anyone, there's a lot of people who think that this has lost some steam or that nothing's going to happen. Dare I say, particularly, can I say, Martin, that in the last week, we've seen some major revelations come out about the Higgins situation and about who knew what, where, and what was the motivation of certain people, and in particular when it comes to certain payments. And as we go into next week, so we're recording on Saturday night on the 10th of June. Next week, we are going to see some major some major confrontations in the parliament, particularly around this issue of misleading the parliament and issues of integrity and issues of intent, and what if things were politicized for some untoward reason. Well, the whole show about The Final Secret was all about the Prime Minister standing shoulder to shoulder with people he shouldn't be appearing with during a criminal investigation, which is unheard of in Australian political history. So we are getting to a crunch point where in the second half of the year, something big, I think, is going to come of this whole ASIC inquiry, my package, and where it ends up, I don't know. But the documents I've received in the last 24 hours gives us a whole host of new ammunition to really go after this incompetent ASIC leadership. And even though that 2 senior executives at ASIC have been forced out as part of this restructure, the remaining leaders are still a major problem. And I still confidently believe that we need wholesale reform. Again, not just in terms of the commissions, but this senior executive board who are full of people who've been there for 20 years and who have overseen a sinking ship. And so they'll be, I guess, one of the main thrusts as we go forward. It's culture, it's leadership, its attitude, and it's a commitment to excellence that ASIC is completely lacking. And without, I guess, this campaign, Martin, without the Adams report, without all the pressure that you and I have exerted on this whole question, dare I say, ASIC would have been sailing right throughout 2022, 2023, continuing to do what it does and frustrating the public and allowing white-collar criminals to get away with absolute financial murder. And I think we've turned the conversation around a lot. And I think as we go forward, we're going to really get somewhere where we can eventually try to fix the problem. Because I guess the big frustration for me is this is not a new problem. This is 15 years in the making, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. And we have to be able to crack this nut if we are going to stop being a soft target for white-collar crime. And unfortunately, Martin, Australia is a very big soft target for both domestic and international financial fraudsters. And we see it time and again where Australians lose their life savings when it comes to financial misconduct. And a lot of people have gone through enormous hardship. One of the things that has come up in the last week, Martin, is that back in late 2021, there was an inquiry into the Sterling First fiasco, and that's something you and I think, spoke about at the time. And I know Robbie Barwick of the Citizens Party has spoken about that a lot. Well, in the last week, there's been a Channel 7 story talking about $100 million class action against ASIC for negligence because these people have lost everything and they've been thrown out of their homes. So we don't want to see those sort of situations happen into the future. And I think that with everything that's coming together, we're going to try to get somewhere. Whereas on previous attempts, whether it's the Royal Commission or other reviews or inquiries, they've failed to actually crack the nut.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying, John, isn't it, that look, doing serious work can pay off, but there's no easy answers here, right? In terms of there's a lot of effort involved, a lot of time is involved, but once you start shining the spotlight, the data speaks for itself, doesn't it? And that's why we are getting the momentum now. And I agree with you. ASIC needs to be tidied up. It needs to be thoroughly reset. It needs to focus on the things that it should be doing, which is the protection of the financial system and the investors in Australia. It's not up for fit for purpose. It's not up to the job. And all the data that you've presented has been validated. Needs a big change. So let's hope that this process continues and we break out into a very different environment where, in fact, we've got a financial cop on the beat that's doing its job.
Exactly. So Martin, in conclusion, it is checkmate for ASIC. The people inside the Treasury have confirmed that Adams is correct and ASIC is in decline. And it is the case that ASIC is a very sick organization, obsessed with spin rather than substance. And all the apologies for ASIC at the Financial Review inside the government, but also elsewhere, who thinks ASIC is doing a great job, the game is up. We've exposed them. And one thing I can say, Martin, is that these emails that I've received from the Treasury, I've already submitted them to the ASIC inquiry and the Senate Economics References Committee. I've sent them to the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services. I've sent them to a whole host of politicians and people of the media. And I'm spreading this information around because ASIC has no defense. And ASIC should know that even if they're trying to do some sort of smokescreen restructure, it's a political fix and it's not going to work. And we're going to keep on coming after them until we get rule reform in the public interest.
Absolutely, John. As you say, in the public interest and in the interests of the people. Martin North, John Adams, in the interest of people. We'll see you next time.